Welcome, everyone. My name is Katie Bramall, and I serve as the Director of Museum Experiences here at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. Today, we are going to be talking with Truth and Reconciliation featured artist Rebecca Nava Soto. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Just to give you a little background about Rebecca, she is a mixed media painting, digital, and installation artist. Her work is rooted in experiences of heightened states of visual perception, materiality, and in her experience as a second-generation American of a Mexican descent. Her art practice foregrounds the artistic roots, processes, and ideologies of the often marginalized and silenced indigenous roots of the Latinx population. Rebecca received her B.F.A. in painting from the University of Cincinnati School of D.A.A.P. in 2000, and her M.F.A. in painting from Boston University in 2006. She has taught fine arts, design, and art history at various colleges and universities since 2008, and currently serves on the faculty at the Art Academy of Cincinnati. She has also been the lead teaching artist for 11 public murals through the Arts Works organization over the past 2 decades. Again, welcome, Rebecca. I'm so excited to have you for this discussion today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. It's been an honor to be showing my work at the Freedom Center. It's really been just a dream project. So I'm happy to talk about it a little bit today.
Yeah, so, we are here to talk about Rebecca's pieces and project in the Arts Wave Truth and Reconciliation exhibit, which is currently installed at the Freedom Center. Rebecca's project, the Edge Project, is a series of Mesoamerican inspired mixed media paintings, digital projection, and ephemeral floor installation. These works operate as a visual continuum rooted with indigenous aesthetics extending into contemporary Latinx culture through themes of perception, iconography, writing, and image making, and popular materials. These works explore ideas in an ancient science, spirituality, cosmology, and their relevance today. So, we're really here to learn more about this project. So can you talk to me a little bit more about this piece and sort of your inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so this was, there was a call to artists in November of last year, and they were asking Arts Wave for a response by Black and Brown artists locally to talk a little bit about the last, at that point, 9 months, 8 months of what has arisen during the kind of collective stillness that was imposed upon us with the pandemic, where we saw come to the surface the overt and systemic racism that sort of propelled us into a really heightened state of our national reckoning with that racial, our issues that we have in the United States specifically and locally. And so how is that affecting us? And artists that potentially had been marginalized or have been considered other in the main lineage of basically everything that the way that the United States has developed. And so the Edge Project particularly came to me in response. The year before, I had spent every Friday at the Maya exhibit, which was at the Cincinnati Museum Center. And I studied this particular effect called the Edge effect. In ecology, it's what is called in a contemporary sense with ecologists today, but ancient indigenous people from Mesoamerica, modern day Mexico, and Central America also came to the same conclusion that in this edge effect the edge effect is a boundary between two distinct environments that come together and overlap and meet. Here we see violence, we see clashing, we see conflict, we see just so many horrific things that kind of reverberated with what was going on, in 2020 for me. And so I wanted to see through the eyes of that marginalized knowledge, that is connected with my lineage, but to see that it was a place of all those things, but also we see synergy and we see nature at its most creative and robust. And it's the perfect conditions, believe it or not. And this is the hope that we can see from this, an opportunity for a new species to sprout. And so I saw that metaphorically, as did my ancestors, that we can learn always from nature. We're not separate. We're inextricably linked, tied to, part of the natural world. And so we learn, they learned, and we can learn from that. And so this was the inspiration behind the project in a broad sense, the Edge Project, or El Borde, which is the translation into Spanish.
Yeah, that's that's obviously really powerful, and I love the metaphor and the connection back to the earth, which if visitors haven't been able to see your piece yet, I think that's very clear. Your piece is, it's very clear and it's very present, and
Thank you. Really... It's hard to always know. I know what it's like for what it is for me, but I'm always happy to hear feedback. So
yeah. And you mentioned a little bit about it, and I've talked about it in your bio, in your project description, but it was important for you to highlight Mesoamerican culture. So can you talk a little bit more about that and your connection to that and how you wanted to bring that forward in the pieces?
Sure. I like you mentioned in the intro, I'm born of Mexican immigrant parents, and we have lived in the Midwest. They rooted here, and I've grown up here for the most part. And so in my upbringing, and then when I was in my education in elementary, middle, high school, and even into college, even into graduate school, there was a focus of what Western European worldview, perspective, point of view, materials, processes, beliefs, ideologies. It was just what I was embedded in. And I sort of went along, we are, all of us are just who, we're part of our environment. We are part of our environment and what influences us. So, I was fortunate enough to go to Mexico every other summer since I was born to visit family and so on. But in my mainstream education, it was very peripheral, if at all, like during a certain little Hispanic Heritage Month or Day of the Dead. It was really snippets. I was fortunate in my senior year at D.A.A.P at the University of Cincinnati to take a pre-Columbian art history course where I really got the opportunity to deep dive into this Mesoamerican culture. And I was just dumbfounded that this incredible span of 3,500 years on this continent, this was a true, deep rooted American history. And so I could find out to the hour these exchanges that happened historically, these extraordinary innovations of science, of astronomy, of writing, of art, of beekeeping, and on and on and on and on, architecture, agriculture, mathematics. And how could this just be a blip, in the mainstream education? We would go all the way to Europe to study ancient art. And although those are fascinating places and histories, extremely wonderful, why weren't we honoring, this on this continent history? So I just really, even if I think that I wasn't of Mexican descendancy or, Latinx, I would still, and many of my classmates found it fascinating, and so I think that should be part of our curriculum. And even well-meaning institutions that want to implement this, there's really not a lot of resource to implement these educational sources. So in my way, as an artist, as an educator, primarily artist, I wanted to bring in this culture, this history. What if we look at immigrants and in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and I really believe they should know this history. And I think that everybody should know the history. I think that would change some kind of attitudes towards one another, and particularly with a Latinx person. I don't think even many of them don't know all of this in-depth research and history. So that was important to me. It's been important to me since I was graduating college, and so I continued to foreground that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that is incredibly important. I believe that that's how we build empathy. Empathy is exploring, and seeing the world through other people's eyes and exploring different cultures and different experiences. I think that's how we grow. So I think that that's important, that we're, you as an artist are constantly incorporating that into your work, and you can see it very clearly too, into the pieces that are at the Freedom Center.
Yeah. At the same time, I grew up in the Midwest, and I went to painting school, and I'm here, so I've taken like I studied painting, that idea, all these wonderful concepts, but then I've brought them into this other processes, ideologies of art making, specifically materials, and so on. And I know we'll be talking about that as we move along a little bit.
Yeah. And I wanted to touch on too, you mentioned in this project, specifically in the Edge project, that it explores ideas in ancient science and spirituality and cosmology. And we've talked a little bit about this, but can you kind of, refocus a little bit more on what that means for this specific piece?
Yes, again, I think what was interesting about these ancient cultures in Mesoamerica, and I specifically focus a lot on Maya because we just have a lot of evidence and history that remains, is that they were always studying the natural world. They were scientists. There was particular people assigned to look to the natural world, to translate and agriculture, plants, animals, beekeeping, the weather, and methods like that. And so, not to mention astronomy and other avenues, but there was this sort of focus on art being central to science, which is, we don't do that here in this particular incarnation of society, but that's what they did. They saw it as a continuum, one informing the other. And so, like I mentioned, I was really interested in that scientific aspect of the sciences, observational science and botany, and looking to the natural world that I noticed at the Maya exhibit at the Cincinnati Museum Center, that I was fortunate enough to go every Friday for the year plus that it was there, and just do research. And that led me to knowing that as art was part of every aspect of society, with leading into belief systems, cosmology, worldview, and spirituality, this informed my pieces. Like the floor piece is a symbol, is an image of a large snake. The snake in Mesoamerica was a symbol of death, transformation, and rebirth. And so this is what I was feeling was a possibility right now in 2020 and into 2021. And the Toltec tradition, and many of you might know that the Maya calendar from 2012 to 2021 is sort of thought to be a very transformative period in these ancient ideologies. And so I really was thinking, this is happening right now. So the snake image was that idea of death, transformation, and rebirth, ushering in the death of the world as we know it in all of its problematic ways and the beginning of a new one. And then embedded into the floor piece were hands. They're brown hands, and they're holding a stylus or a pencil or a wand, whatever you want to think of. But it's it's a symbol for me to say that we write the new world. We are writing now the new script through our imaginations. And so as we see such violence and turbulence in that edge environment that we all are experiencing individually, locally, and communities at large, we can say, yes, this is really uncomfortable and painful. And where is the hope? It's dying. And so I wanted to usher that in with this symbol of the snake, the hands in that embedded water and landscape feeling that the snake is on, speaking to writing this new story, these manifestation techniques of the individual writing the new story, and then collectively it happening. And so that's the really sort of the hopeful part of it. And then it's also seen in terms of the spiritual aspect in the pieces that frame that central wall piece. There's a piece called Write It. There's two, 1 and 2, Write It, 1 and 2. And they're framing the top part of that central piece. And that particular iconography is rooted in this ancient pictographic language that the Maya invented, which is interesting because it does parallel this European sort of distillation process of abstraction. So we do see a lot of commonalities in my own, art education. And so it's saying, write it, write it. That's also reflecting and reverberating those floor hands that have a stylus. Those wall pieces have a stylus and a hand holding it. And that is, as this world dies, this incarnation of the world, we now can write our new story. And so there's the two pieces below the write it hands is to end. And it looks like hands sort of like squishing a fish. I heard some people talk about how it looks like squid or something like that. I mean, I really like the open imagery of abstraction because I love to hear what people bring into it. I really like them to kind of bring in their own personal experiences and questions and imagination to, what could this be? But knowing that there's also, this is really linked to an ancient language that symbolized to end. So ending the new world. And then the centerpiece has several different also hands symbolizing a collective humanity with a digital projection onto it of a fire onto it, going through the transition of embers to burning and to black smoke. This is really interesting because it was inspired by the new fire ceremony that originated with the Olmec tradition. The Olmec were the very first people in the Americas, and they are the ancestors of all of the Mesoamerican people, Toltec, Aztec, Perpetua, Mixteca, Maya. They all came from the Olmec people, and so the centerpiece goes on a loop. And this speaks to this new fire ceremony that also worked with the calendar. They were the first calendar people, the Olmecs. They date back to 1500 BCE. And so they were the first people who started to track time and create a calendar. And so they did a new fire ceremony when the end of one cycle was done and when the new one was going to begin. And so that the title of that piece is New Fire to Die, ushering the death of the old world, in my view, connected to today and bringing in order to clear way for the new world to emerge. And so, so this is the idea that is tied with these ancient rituals and spirituality and ideologies and writing systems and bringing them into the present. to speak to what's happening today. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. You know, you start talking about a little bit about the individual pieces. What's the funnest to me to watch visitors interact with the piece is they're very textured. And it's fun to watch the visitors interact with it and try to figure out what type of medium is being used. So can you talk a little bit more about the medium, especially in the floor piece?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what, for me, when I look at an artwork, the first thing that captivates me is a visceral reaction, a visceral engagement with the work on a deep level, you know, like texture and color is something that really, first of all, I have just this experience, this guttural experience with the piece. And then sometimes I don't even know what's going on. Secondly, I know what's going on if I investigate further with my mental capacities, but in the perception state, I'm just like, what's this drawing me in, engaging me, curiosity, imagination, what could this be? And so that's what I think we all look for what we love and what we want to do as an artist. You know, I grew up making piñatas and like paper flowers with my mom and my family in Mexico. And then, you know, as I grew up here in our communities in Cincinnati, I grew up Catholic. So we would do these floor alfombras that were done during Holy Week in Semana Santa, the Catholic period of the Holy Week. So we would make these floor pieces of colored sawdust. And this is a tradition that it's in Guatemala, it's in Mexico. And, you know, they're so elaborate, they're so beautiful, they're communal, they're captivating. They even do them during the Day of the Dead ceremonies. It's just on and on and on. And so I researched that a lot of these materials, like the paper flowers, the piñata, the alfombras, although they have a huge European influence, there was evidence of this from the indigenous roots. Again, I want to foreground that because we foreground the others so much that it's just sort of a rebalancing act. You know, and especially because ultimately, I think that the indigenous people in Mexico and the ones that we see here in the United States, there's still this extraordinary, like, what we call colorismo in Mexico, this sort of just harsh racism that's happening with indigenous people or indigenous looking people. You know, it's like, because a lot of Mexico is really a mix now, but there are people who are more indigenous in their DNA or whatever, and they're not treated well, you know. And then there's this part of Mexico that will claim so much pride in their indigenous heritage, but they treat the living and breathing indigenous people now terribly. And so for me, I want to show these art processes, materials, and lineages as rooted, for example, with the alfombras. It dates back to before, with the Olmecs. There's pictographic evidence that these floor artworks were used to honor deities at different times of the year in their interconnectedness with this reciprocity in nature. And so there was evidence of that in the Olmec culture, which is the oldest, right, in the Americas. That's 1500 BCE. And the paper is the paper art that's used in celebrations in Latinx culture, popular celebrations and materials. That dates from 300, Common Era, 300. We see evidence of that. But the paper that was used was amate, and it was used for clothing, ceremony, for documentation of history, art, scientific processes in keeping bees and different agricultural processes, astronomy. You know, they documented everything on this paper, but they also used it for art, decoration, and celebration, and for clothing, rituals, costumes. So it was re-tied into, you know, this paper influence from Europe and from Asia. So yeah, I just really want to kind of say, what would happen if these processes continued? What does it look like outside of this colonial influence? It survived despite colonialism, so that's good. And so fascinating things are continuing to happen culturally as well. I'll just say one little side note to that the indigenous people of Mexico are extraordinarily complex, and in like no other place in the world, they are continuing to thrive and to grow in complexity. And I think there's like 33 Maya dialects, not even Aztec or anything else, just Maya. There's 33 different dialects within that language. So it's really extraordinary and complex. So yeah, that's the source of real fascination for me.
Thank you again for sharing that with us. Like I said, it's been so, you know, rewarding, I think, to watch the visitors engage with your pieces and find so much joy in them. So I just want to thank you, you know, for bringing that, for, you know, being a part of Truth and Reconciliation with Arts Wave, but also for bringing them to the Freedom Center and discussing this in this way and kind of working through, you know, inspires you and why this is important to connect back to the roots of history.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything else that you would like visitors to know about you or your work in particular?
You can find me I'm most active on Instagram, my art Instagram page. I have, you know, that's where I kind of see it's like my news outlet for things that are going on in the studio and imagery of in-work progress and things like that. So that's the best way. I'm on Facebook too. I think I have an art page there. What else? I think that's it. Hopefully you can come and see the show before it's over. We've got couple more weeks, I think.
Yes. And what's really fast? What is your Instagram handle? Is it just your full name?
Yeah, Rebecca Nava Soto. Okay. So check it out. Follow me, and I that's really a place where I, you know, love to explore other people's artwork too. So send me a message there. That's the quickest way. And I also have a website, RebeccaNavaSoto.com, and that's currently being updated as well with these new images from the show. So that's the place to meet me.
Awesome. Well, again, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today and having this conversation with me. I greatly appreciate it. I know our visitors will appreciate it. You can view Rebecca's art installation at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center up until September 30th. So again, still got a couple of weeks. We are open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 5. And you can find more information about visiting the museum at freedomcenter.org. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Bye.